For all my Chick-fil-A lovers out there, this episode is for you. Welcome back to another episode of the Get Over Yourself podcast hosted by Brandon Davis. And on today's episode, I'm going to be featuring my new friend and former manager of Chick-fil-A, Philip Blackett. Philip, thanks for joining the show. Philip is an author, consultant, and entrepreneur who previously has worked with FedEx, Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, and Chick-fil-A. He got his Master's of Divinity degree from the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, his MBA from Harvard Business School, and his bachelor's degree, majoring in political science and economics from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Philip has previously been featured in Business Insider, Entrepreneur Magazine, Forbes, and LinkedIn, as well as a number of podcasts. And Philip is not fulfilling his purpose to grow God's people, grow God's businesses, and grow God's kingdom. He enjoys reading, cheering on his Tar Heels, and raising his twin daughters with his wife. And Philip, thank you so much for joining us on today's episode. With that all being said, let's jump into it.
Thanks so much, Brandon. Happy to be here with you.
Yeah, Philip, first question I have for you here. I feel like the world is kind of turning away from God, but you make it very apparent just in that little bio you sent me over as well, that you are a God-fearing man and that you want people to know that. One piece in particular I really enjoyed is you're helping people grow God's businesses. Not everyone views it that way. I've said that before too, and so that caught my eye. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I think about it from the sense that, I've worked for businesses, I've owned businesses. And then I think part of it, Brandon, is just understanding, and granted, not everyone subscribes to this thought, but I do, that everything in the world is not our own, ultimately. We are just stewards for what we have here during the time we're here. So that could be as far as how we go about our bodies, the possessions we have, the family we have, as far as spouse, children, that sort of thing. We're stewards, meaning that somebody else ultimately owns it. And we are basically being good managers of what we have, that we'll be accountable for ultimately. And so I think about that with regards to business as well, that even the term business owner may not truly be 100% like there, because if you think about it, like you might own it in that sort, but ultimately it's God who gives you the ability to amass wealth. And so we're just utilizing what we have, what we've been entrusted with, to make the best use of it. And so I look at it from that standpoint where it's like you're growing God's businesses, where it's just like, if you're looking at this as just your own and that God's not a part of it, you're missing a very fundamental part of what life is all about, because it shouldn't be all about you. It should be more so the sense that, you didn't come here into this world just on your own. You're not breathing just on your own just because you choose to. And so I think that's just keeping that sort of thing in perspective with regards to stewardship, which I'm really big on, versus ownership, and just that thought of everything we have is ultimately not our own, but it's God's.
That's awesome. Yeah, as I'm hearing you say this, I'm picturing the talents that God in the parable.
I was going to go there, but I was like, I don't know if he wants me to preach on this one.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. One joke that me and my co-founder were talking about the other day is somebody was asking us, is it just the two of you? And jokingly, because we knew the other person was Christian as well, we said, no, there's three co-founders. Me, Brandon, Connor, and God's on our side too. He's one of our co-founders. So yeah, it's a very unique way of looking at everything. Especially now in today's society where God is really taken out of the picture more often than he should be. I guess that's always the case, but especially in today's society, I love seeing somebody who says, no, it's not my business. It's not my life. It's not anything I'm doing. It's purely what God has blessed me with the ability to do in and of himself. So thanks for sharing that. I wanted to highlight that a little bit.
Yeah, of course. I think the last thing I'll say on that too, Brandon, is just the thought of, I'm not necessarily opposed to people thinking different things. You can have people on all different sides of the spectrum. What I am saying, though, is if we're going to do that, then I should feel empowered to share what I believe in as well, and allow people to be exposed to all different ways of thinking. Like, diversity of thought is key, and allow people to make their own decisions on where they're going to go, what, way of thinking, what way of living their life they're going to go after seeing what's available. But they'll never know what's available if you're quiet about it.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. You got to get your voice out there. Just as the contrary view says, you have to put out your view as well, just so everyone can hear it. And that actually brings us into the next subject I wanted to hit. So you were an author, and one of the books you wrote was discussing the diversity we have in today's political climate, where you have one side of the spectrum and the other side, they're always battling each other. Nobody needs me to paint the picture. You see it in the news every day. You see it in your work. You see it everywhere you go. Tell us a little bit about the book you wrote and why that was so influential and why people should check it out as well.
Yeah, so I believe you're alluding to one of my first books. So I've written six this year and published them. And the book that I'm doing a lot of promotion about that feels really timely is called Disagree Without Disrespect: How to Respectfully Debate with Those Who Think, Believe, and Vote Differently from You. And so one of the key things about that is understand that this is not primarily a political book. Just because you see vote in the subtitle does not mean it's only dealing with politics. I mentioned think differently, believe differently, vote differently. What it should come off to you as you're hearing that is any relationship you have with somebody, like I would venture to say, Brandon, we just met here, but if I got to know you over a extended period of time, I would bet and almost guarantee you there are some things that you absolutely will agree with me on and we share common ground on. And I also guarantee that there'll be some things that you say, I sort of go about things a little differently on that one, or I think a different way, right? Or I believe in something different from what you're going about it, or we just flat out disagree. And one of the primary aims of this book is trying to help people understand that disagreement is apparent. If you're not disagreeing about something, it's almost like what they say about entrepreneurship. If you're not failing at something, you're not truly trying, right? If you're not disagreeing with somebody on something, you're not really close to that person. You're not really knowing more about that person. It's easy to love people that you agree with. It's a whole nother thing to love people and respect people, even if you don't agree on everything. And so I think a big part of this book is really helping people understand that disagreements didn't just all of a sudden happen like this year or recently or 4 years ago. We've had disagreements from the beginning of time, beginning of civilization. What's key, though, what's different about where we are now versus before when I was growing up is we did have a manner as far as how we navigated disagreements. How do we go about, working with people, living with people, being friends with people with different opinions, different perspectives, different viewpoints, different worldviews, where it wasn't so much something you just silence people or you just canceled them or you unfriended people the moment you find out they had a different way of looking at things. There's a way you go about it. And I would argue if that's the way we're going about it, are we truly a people that really value diversity? Because I would argue diversity goes beyond skin deep or what you see on the outside. Diversity should be inclusive of diversity of thought. So really, this book is really trying to help share that and provide a framework that people can understand. Okay, Philip, I understand differences are apparent. How do I best go about it where I can still keep the relationship and just talk about the issues at hand, share my viewpoint, hear the other person's viewpoint? How do we best navigate that? And when the debate is finished, we can still be friends. We can
Mhm.
still be like spouses. We can still have a relationship going for it. Because one of the things that I feel a lot in my heart is the thought that it is possible for you to respect and love somebody in a healthy relationship even if you don't agree on everything.
So let me ask you, what's the strategy then? In theory, this sounds amazing, right? Everyone wants to agree with this. Everyone wants to say, hey, at the end of the day, like if you disagree with me politically, if we have different views, heck, even beyond politics, if we have different views on who God is, if I believe in God, if you don't, if I am more capitalistic, if I'm not capitalistic, there's a million things that fall into this category. Of course, we all want to say we can agree and get along and we could still be friends and kumbaya, but that's clearly not the case of where the world is at today. So what's the reality of this situation? How do we actually practice what you're preaching here?
Yeah, because I think, you hit on a big point, Brandon. I mean, literally at the time of us, doing this episode, like the day before, I was celebrating my 8th year wedding anniversary with my wife. And one of the things I commonly say to people is, my wife and I have been together, married for 8 years. In those 8 years, have we agreed on 100% of everything? And if that was
Definitely.
apparent that was needed in order for us to stay together, if it was contingent for me to last 8 years that we would agree on everything, we probably would not have made it past the honeymoon stage, right? And all things, set aside, jokes aside, that should be an example for everybody to understand. Like, if you're in the most intimate, the most close of relationships, and you can still be together and you don't see eye to eye on everything, then we obviously can do the same thing in less intimate relationships, right? It's just about understanding how do you best go about it. So, to your point, Brandon, what's the framework? Simple 5 steps. First step is separate the idea or belief from the identity of the believer. Why that is important is because oftentimes, depending on the person you're talking to, there may be an idea or belief that he or she is so intertwined with that it essentially becomes who he or she is. And what makes that challenging is for me to debate that idea or belief, they're so intertwined with what that idea or belief is. Now it seems like I'm debating who that person is.
Mm-hmm.
If I criticize that idea, now they look at it in a sense like, now my ego is in question. My way of looking at things is in question. I don't want to look bad. So I'm taking this personal. I'm going to be on the defensive, build up a wall. And now I'm looking at it in the sense like, okay, he's attacking me, so I need to attack back. Right. And so that's not what we're trying to go at. If you're trying to go on the issue at hand and strictly that, I'm not attacking the person. And that gets into step number 2. You can
Can I pause you
disagree.
there real quick before you
Yeah,
jump into
go
number
for it.
2? As you're talking about this, to give another example out there to all the listeners, Jesus Christ, when he performed his earthly ministry, he did it in a loving manner. Did that mean he agreed with the way that people were acting? Did that mean the other people agreed with the way Christ was acting in his new teachings? Most of the time, no. Most of the time, no. You hear the stories of him flipping the tables of all the money exchangers at the temple. You hear all these stories of him correcting people, of him being very disciplined and saying that is not the right way. And I'm sure even him being Jesus Christ, I'm sure that wasn't an easy conversation to have with a lot of these people. But I think the key to what you just said there with number 1, Philip, is we do it from a place with love, especially if individuals have intertwined their entire personality around these beliefs that they have, political, spiritual, whatever. If they are intertwined so deeply into that thought, where we come in, if we really want to make a change and we want to express our views as well in a non-combative manner, I think we have to be doing it from a place of love. Go
Of
ahead,
course.
continue on number 2.
No, of course. A key principle in that, what you're saying, Brandon, is speak the truth in love. Right. So if you can go on 2 extremes on that one, just in and of itself, if I focus so much on truth, then it comes off more legalistic and I'm being more judgmental. Like, it may be right what I'm saying as far as what's right and what's wrong and whether we're doing right or whether we're doing wrong. But if you're not doing it with love on the other end, you're just like, as the Bible said, just like a crashing cymbal, essentially. But if you're so loving that you're okay with people going down the wayside and a better way of living is available to them, and you're not sharing that because, oh, I don't want to offend them, I want them to feel happy. Their happiness is what's most important to me. As long as you are happy, Brandon, that's what's most important to me. Even if it puts you down a route that might lead to rocky roads for your marriage, or a uncertain future for you professionally, or a bad place for you to be eternally later on, right? But I'm just so loving and caring about that. So you have to have both of those together. So there is a healthy tension between speaking the truth and doing it with love. And so I think that makes a lot of sense. And even with Jesus, is like he is my supreme objective example on how to go about this. Because like you said, there's plenty of stories, there's plenty of examples where I even think about the Samaritan woman. when Jesus encountered her, you know, there was love there towards her, but he also shared some truth about her too and
Yep.
about her situation. So, there's a way to go about it. And that gets into step number two. You can disagree with the person's idea or belief and love the person who believes in it, love the believer. So it's a play off what I've learned in church, which was hate the sin, love the sinner,
Mm-hmm.
right? So what you're doing essentially there is saying, look, a good way to say this is, from parenting, you can tell a kid like, I love you, and I hate that you are disrespecting your mother when she's asking you to eat your vegetables. I love you, and I dislike how you're not, obeying what I'm saying as far as let's get ready for bedtime and that sort of thing, right? So you can still have both and you make it clear to somebody. I respect you, Brandon. I appreciate who you are as a person. I just disagree with what you're saying on this one. Doesn't mean I disagree with who you are as a person, but it's just that idea. So once again, you're trying to be clear with people, and if people can appreciate clarity, right? They may not see eye to eye with you, but they can at least appreciate you being clear with them to say, hey, listen,
Mm-hmm.
what I'm talking about is the issue at hand. It's not personal. It's not, don't take this as a negative attack on you. And I think if you set the groundwork that way, now you have a setting where you can actually debate the issue at hand, which is step number three. You debate the issue at hand based on its merit in that alone. What do I mean by that? Well, when we're debating, Brandon, we're including facts, logic, research, analysis, performance, results, right? A good example would be like if you have two policies you're considering, okay, what are the results on those? Just keep it as sober and as clear and objective as possible. Okay, policy A gives you this, policy B gives you that. Which one makes sense for you? No feelings, no emotions. You keep it business. What you don't want to do, though, is get into what we call ad hominem insults, meaning I'm going to attack you in your character and I'm going to go about name calling. There should not be a place for that. There should be enough within you to say, listen, I may get emotionally charged, I may feel a certain type of way, but I should also understand the moment I call Brandon outside of Brandon, as far as his name is concerned, this debate can potentially go down to the wayside, right? I have not seen a productive debate come out of name calling somebody outside of their name, slandering their character, trying to muddy it up and that sort. I usually what happens, Brandon, when I see that happening is that show me someone who resorts to that, and I'll show you someone who can't win the debate just on its merit alone. They're in a desperate place to either confuse people or to completely detract and deflect and completely like dismiss the debate altogether. Because
Yeah.
at that point, now you're at a stalemate because now you're just trading insults and now no one wants to listen. No one wants to debate. And now you just tell everyone we're just going to stop.
Well, the issue with that too is it's the loudest voice always wins when it comes to those situations. They might be just spewing absolute crap coming out of their mouths, but if they could say it loudest and say it, even if it's not like a good argument, if they could say it clearly, then people will think they did a great job. That's what you see with modern politics today. I'm excited for this Trump Biden debate coming up because I feel like both of them are just going to attack each other and nothing's ever actually going to change. If you find me one person who switches who they're voting for after these debates, I'm going to be shocked. Let's put it that way.
Well, and to your point, Brandon, I think one, and even in that issue itself, I do think that the American people deserve to see both candidates be in the same room, not behind their spin rooms, not behind social media, and just attack the issues at hand.
Mhm.
Now, what they do in addition to that, extracurricular wise, you know, understand people are paying attention to that because what also comes about is how you debate is just as important as what you debate on, right? So if you're getting to the point where you're focusing just on the merits of your platform, your policies, your achievements, what you bring to the table, and how it's going to be helpful and beneficial to the voter, and you dismiss or you deflect when the other person is trying to attack your character or your reputation, or is trying to win brownie points by some zinger soundbite that has nothing to do with what you're trying to bring to the table in an office, then that's a way that you can actually stay above the fray that will actually appeal to people that are still deciding, because you come off in this situation more presidential rather than more drama, right? But that's a key example of step number 3. And so let's get into step number 4. After you've had the debate, Brandon, whether it's you coming to my side on things or me going the other way, vice versa, maybe we agree to disagree and we stand on our separate points, separate areas of the room, or maybe some third alternative we weren't even anticipating in the first place that bubbles up as a byproduct of us having this conversation. Regardless of the outcome, let's exhibit what we've practiced when we were young in sports. When we played sports, win or lose, what did each team do at the end?
You go clap each other up, you go shake each other's hands and say, good game.
There you go. Good sportsmanship is still needed even when we're adults. It's not something that should just be limited to sports, because at the end of the day, Brandon, we don't all love a sore loser, and we don't all love a sore winner either. So at the end of the day, we can be good sports about it, where I've seen 2 attorneys, for example, argue a case very aggressively, very passionately in a courtroom. And after the case was decided upon and the courtroom was dismissed, I saw something that most people didn't pay attention to when everyone was leaving. The 2 attorneys, oftentimes, they did shake hands. One did congratulate the other. And what led into what I would call step 5, what I often saw them do anyways afterwards, is those same 2 attorneys that were arguing beforehand, I often would see them having lunch together. I often would see one go into the other person's soccer game for their daughter on the weekend, or maybe spending time with the other family for the holidays, in which nowadays you would think that's beyond sleeping with the enemy. That's treason, right? How dare you associate with somebody that thinks differently from you? But back then, when I saw that, that was a clear example for me that step number 5, after the debate, you can still respect and appreciate that person for who he or she is. If you still see things differently, hey, we can agree to disagree. That's part of having an environment that favors and appreciates diversity of thought. And you leave the door open to continue the dialogue. You leave the door open to continue building the relationship. So maybe the case, Brandon, listen, Brandon, I know we had a good conversation about this. I appreciate you sharing your viewpoint here. I didn't know the backstory on why this particular topic was so important to you and why you're favoring this call to action versus what I was saying. Even though I see something different on how we can go about it in the midst of our conversation, I appreciate you sharing that with me. And honestly, I'd love for us to maybe talk more about it. I'd love to learn more about your background on this over lunch sometime. Or maybe there's an event coming up next week that talks about this very same thing. Why don't we go together? And maybe we can follow up on that over a beer or some pizza or something like that, and just kind of reflect on that and just continue the conversation. Like, it doesn't have to be one and done, right? But that's what's showing true maturity and emotional intelligence from the standpoint of saying, listen, even if we don't see things eye to eye, we can still build a relationship. Because oftentimes, and maybe you can understand this as far as someone being married, you might be able to attest to the fact that oftentimes it's the conflicts that 2 people go through and how they work it out that it actually strengthens the relationship. Because if you value the relationship more than being right or wrong, then you're much more likely to end with a better result than if you did otherwise.
Very
And so
true.
my thing is, if many more of us had that same mentality to say, listen, my relationship with you, Brandon, is more important than whether or not you and I agree on this. I want to share this with you so we both know more about each other. But at the end of the day, our disagreement is not more important to the point where it wrecks our friendship or that it puts us in an awkward place where I don't want to work with you anymore or that I'm going to unfollow or unfriend you or go on social media and trash you in the comments, right? But that's the point where we have to go as a people. And I
Yeah,
know it's possible. And I think that with a framework of what I'm sharing here that's in my book, that's my aim, to get more people aware of that possibility and for us individually and collectively move into a better place where we can disagree better, we can appreciate diversity of thought, and we actually can still respect and love people in a healthy relationship, even if we disagree.
that's awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Philip. And guys, I also want to point this out. More often than not, as Philip was talking, you're probably sitting there thinking of somebody else who needs to hear this advice. You're thinking of the person you got into the argument with. You're thinking of your family member, that aunt at Thanksgiving who never shuts up about politics. That's who you're thinking of right now. But my challenge for all of you is to take Philip's words right now and apply them to yourself, not for somebody else, not for the person you're thinking of, but to yourself. You are where the change needs to happen. If everyone could take Philip's message and personally apply it, the world would be a lot happier of a place and we'd get along a lot more. So, Philip, as we're closing out on today's episode of the Get Over Yourself podcast, we took a turn and I liked where we were going. I liked the deep dive discussion we had, but I do have to close out on a totally different note on the Chick-fil-A that we brought up at the very beginning of the episode. Tell us about your time at Chick-fil-A. Why do you guys have such amazing customer service? Why are the mints so fluffy every time I put them in my mouth? And why is the Chick-fil-A sauce so darn good?
So, those are a lot of questions that I'm not sure we have time to adequately and sufficiently do justice in answering. But I will say this, right? The customer service part, this is a part of the culture where, you know, it goes back to the founders, it goes back to the Cathy family, right? There's something to be said about principles that stand the test of time over time, right? It's not something that all of a sudden you have a new administration, now you just change everything. Like, consistency has its benefits. And so if you put it in place that, we're doing the best we can to give the best customer experience for people that are coming to dine with us, and that's reflected in when we open, the fact that we close on Sundays to give our workers a time off, whether they believe in Christianity or not, whether it's us being able to put on our outfits to go outside to take orders while people are already in line so that they feel like, their time is precious and that they get fresh, hot, delicious food when they come in or when they get it through the drive-through, or the fact that we have uniforms so that everyone, there's a certain professionalism. You start to look at everything, like how we clean the bathrooms, right, on a schedule, right, not just when something happens, right? It's regular, like, maintenance in the bathroom, in the dining area. So it's basically systematizing what needs to be done to best come off with a excellent customer experience for everybody, really having that positive impact and influence in everyone we come across to, and being good stewards of what we've been entrusted to by God. So I think that it basically is saying, hey, our words say one thing, and we want our actions to back up our words. We don't want to be hypocrites. We want to be consistent in what we do. And so we put that in a system that everyone follows, because that's the beauty part. If you go to one Chick-fil-A here and the other place, another Chick-fil-A 20, 30 minutes down the line, you
Exact
should
same.
have that consistency.
Yep. That is very true. Well, Philip, I appreciate that. I appreciate your years of serving up my chicken sandwiches and for the amazing insights you had on today's political climate. Guys, once again, I challenge all of you to listen to and heed Philip's words. Make sure you're applying them for yourself, not the person you were thinking of as he was talking. And with that all being said, we'll see you guys next week.